There is a moment, a strange and delicate moment, when the world feels colder than the air around you, a moment when the mind begins to quiet, as if something ancient is calling from far beyond the edges of the familiar map. And if you listen closely, very closely, you may notice it, a distant, icy breath drifting through the silence, like the faint exhale of a sleeping giant. For thousands of years, the polar regions have existed in human imagination as places beyond understanding, vast white deserts, where time slows, sound vanishes, and the earth reveals its oldest memories. In these frozen realms, every snowflake is a fragment of history, every gust of wind a whisper from an age before ours. Scientists say the ice holds secrets that predate civilization, buried layers of atmosphere, extinct microbes, traces of forgotten climates, a silent library of the planet's past. And yet, the most haunting truth is not what lies beneath the ice, but how it shapes the mind. In the deep polar quiet, thoughts drift like snow, slow, weightless, unhurried. The cold becomes a kind of clarity, a gentle stillness that softens the boundaries of awareness. It is here, in this endless white horizon, that the noise of life finally falls away and something deeper awakens. Tonight, we are going there, to the frozen edges of the planet, to the ancient breath of the poles, to the glacial silence that has waited longer than memory. And as you listen, you may feel your own thoughts begin to settle, softly, slowly, almost imperceptibly, like snow descending onto an untouched world. In the farthest corners of our planet, where the sun moves in slow, deliberate arcs and shadows stretch across a landscape of endless white, the world begins to behave differently. The air thickens with cold, the horizon blurs with drifting crystals, and the familiar rhythm of life fades into a soft, frozen hum. Here, beneath thousands of meters of compacted snow, lies a reservoir of ancient time. Each layer of ice, pressed gently upon the next, is a preserved echo of distant ages, ages when continents shifted, oceans cooled, and early humans had not yet taken their first hesitant breath. Scientists who drill into this frozen archive describe the experience not as excavation, but as listening to the memory of Earth itself. The deeper the core sample descends, the further back it travels in time. At 200 meters, the ice speaks of medieval winters. At 1,000, it whispers of glacial empires that once covered half the world. And far below that, 3,000 meters deep, the trapped air holds the chemical fingerprints of atmospheres more than 800,000 years old. These bubbles are not mere pockets of gas, they are frozen moments, tiny sealed rooms where time has waited in perfect stillness. When researchers break them open, the past escapes with a faint, crystalline sigh, revealing how the planet breathed long before our civilizations began to write their own stories. Yet the power of the polar regions extends far beyond their historical archives. The ice itself behaves like a living, dynamic organism, growing, shrinking, cracking, drifting, reshaping the very edges of continents. Massive glaciers flow with the patience of mountains learning to move, their surfaces smooth and silent, while their undersides grind against the earth with unimaginable pressure. Some move only a few centimeters each year. Others surge forward without warning, advancing like slow-motion tsunamis of frozen water. And beneath many of them, hidden from the sun's touch, lie dark subglacial lakes, sealed worlds that have never seen open air, where unique microbial life persists in pitch-black isolation. As night deepens across these frozen expanses, a strange transformation occurs within the mind. Surrounded by so much emptiness, thought begins to drift into wider spaces. The constant internal dialogue, the planning, the remembering, the self-narration quietly loosens its grip. The brain's sensory systems calm as the auditory world narrows into gentle, predictable patterns. The distant groan of shifting ice, the soft shiver of wind sweeping across a snowfield, the muted pulse of one's own breathing. Neurologists note that environments of extreme stillness lower cortical activity, allowing the mind to settle into slower, more synchronized rhythms. In the polar silence, this shift feels almost effortless, as if the mind is aligning itself with the deep, ancient steadiness of the ice. Over time, something remarkable happens. The boundary between the listener and the environment grows thinner. You do not stand beside the ice. You feel as though you are drifting within it. Each breath carries a faint chill. Each exhale forms a cloud that blends seamlessly into the frozen air. Your awareness expands yet softens, moving in slow waves through the vast white expanse. This is not the emptiness of isolation, but the spaciousness of release, a quiet invitation to let tension melt away, to allow thoughts to settle like snow on untouched ground. The deeper the mind sinks into this state, the more clearly you sense the immense, ancient calm beneath everything, a calm that belongs not only to the polar world, but to you as well. And so, as we continue our journey across these glacial realms, we travel not only through a physical landscape, but through layers of inner stillness. The ice reminds us that beneath the noise of life lies a quieter, slower rhythm, one that has endured for millennia. An invitation to rest, to drift, to let the mind be held by the same silence that cradles the poles themselves. As we move deeper into the polar world, the very shape of the landscape reveals how profoundly ice can sculpt a planet. From above, glaciers stretch like luminous rivers across the continent, their surfaces shimmering with faint hues of blue and silver beneath the dim Arctic light. These colossal structures are neither static nor simple. They are layered architectures built molecule by molecule, snowflake by snowflake, over spans of time so vast that they challenge the imagination. Each winter adds a fragile veil of snow, and each summer compresses that veil into crystalline solidity. Over centuries, these layers fuse into massive corridors of ice corridors that slowly reshape coastlines, carve out valleys, and influence global sea levels with every subtle shift. Deep within the ice, pressure becomes a transformative force. After millennia of compression, the crystals reorganize themselves into a substance known as glacial ice dents, brilliant, almost glass-like. In some regions, its interior glows with a soft, ethereal blue, a color born from the way the ice absorbs and scatters light. Scientists describe this transformation as a kind of frozen metamorphosis, a gradual restructuring driven by the weight of the world itself. And as the pressure increases further, the ice behaves not like a rigid solid, but like an unimaginably slow and patient liquid, flowing outward under its own immense weight. This quiet movement, measured in centimeters per year, shapes the fate of coastlines thousands of kilometers away. Below the glaciers lies a realm even stranger, the subglacial world. Here, In the lightless depths beneath kilometers of ice, water remains liquid due to pressure and geothermal heat from Earth's interior. Entire networks of hidden rivers and lakes exist in complete isolation, untouched by sunlight for millions of years. In Lake Vostok, for example, one of the largest subglacial lakes on the planet, microbes have been discovered that survive in total darkness, feeding on minerals and chemical reactions rather than light. Their existence suggests something profound, that life does not require the warmth of a sun to endure. It needs only the faintest spark of energy and the patience to persist in silence. As we drift through this frozen architecture, the mind begins to mirror the slow, deliberate movements of the ice. Thoughts elongate, stretching out like glacial streams across vast mental landscapes. Each idea unfolds unhurriedly, softened at the edges, blending into the next without friction. Neurologically, this reflects a shift from high-frequency activity in the prefrontal cortex to deeper, slower oscillations in the limbic and subcortical regions, patterns associated with relaxation, introspection, and the earliest stages of sleep. The polar quiet amplifies this transition. With fewer external stimuli to compete for attention, the brain naturally resynchronizes into smoother, more unified rhythms. In these slower rhythms, awareness settles into a deeper clarity. You begin to sense the subtle architecture of your own inner landscape, memories rising and falling like distant mountains beneath snow. Emotions softening into gentle currents. Fragmented thoughts merging into coherent, fluid streams. There is no urgency here, no pressure to grasp or hold. Instead, there is a sensation of being carried slowly, steadily by something larger and older than yourself. The world of ice becomes a metaphor for the mind's own depth, layered, vast, quietly alive with movement beneath the surface. And as you continue to drift through this frozen expanse, a serene realization emerges. The poles are not merely cold, distant regions at the ends of the world. They are mirrors, reflecting the profound stillness within every human mind. They remind us that beneath all turbulence lies a core of quiet strength, a stability carved over years of experience. And as the glacial calm deepens around you, you may feel your own thoughts settling into that ancient stability, preparing the mind for a deeper descent into rest. Across the frozen horizon, the wind becomes more than moving air. It becomes a presence. In the polar regions, wind behaves differently than it does anywhere else on Earth. It flows over vast, unobstructed plains of ice, gathering no scent, carrying no dust, whispering only a cold purity that feels almost otherworldly. As the katabatic winds descend from the high interior of Antarctica, they accelerate with gravity's pull, flowing downward with a force that can reshape entire landscapes. These winds, though powerful, often sound softer than expected, their voices muted by snow-covered ground and low temperatures. To stand within them is to feel a kind of ancient breath, slow and consistent, as if the earth itself were exhaling with a calm that has lasted for millennia. Within these winds, the atmosphere reveals secrets about how the planet circulates heat. The poles act as massive engines of temperature contrast, pulling warm air from the equator while sending cold air outward, creating global patterns that influence storms, ocean currents, and climate cycles far from the icy frontier. Scientists describe this system as a planetary heartbeat, a slow, rhythmic exchange between warm and cold that stabilizes the climate. When you imagine this process unfolding over thousands of years, the world begins to feel both fragile and extraordinarily resilient. The silence of the poles is not emptiness, it is balance, maintained by invisible movements that connect every corner of the Earth. As the wind travels across the ice, it shapes the snow into intricate structures called sastrugi long, sculpted ridges carved by persistent airflow. These formations behave like frozen waves, capturing the fluidity of the wind in solid form. Their delicate curves and elongated shadows reveal the direction, strength, and history of countless storms. To researchers, these shapes are not just features of the landscape, they are records of motion, the written language of the atmosphere. And as the light shifts across them, the surface appears to ripple gently, as though the ice is breathing under the weight of the sky. In this environment, the human mind undergoes subtle but profound changes. The steady rhythm of the wind provides a form of natural white noise, broad, gentle, and uniform across all frequencies. Such sounds are known to calm neural activity, reducing the brain's tendency to scan for threats and allowing the listener to drift into deeper states of relaxation. The auditory cortex begins to synchronize with the predictable flow of sound, while the amygdala, the region responsible for managing fear and vigilance, becomes quieter. In this softened state, attention loosens its grip, allowing the mind to wander freely, much like snow carried effortlessly by the breeze. As awareness drifts with the wind, you may notice an expanding sense of spaciousness, both around you and within. The icy landscape stretches endlessly in all directions, and this vastness reflects inward, creating a gentle widening of mental perception. Thoughts no longer crowd the mind. They float, separate, suspended like delicate ice crystals in cold air. This spaciousness is deeply restful. It mirrors the kind of mental openness associated with early stages of sleep, those moments when the mind begins to release structure, allowing images, memories, and sensations to merge into a soft, flowing tapestry. In this merging, something quietly transforms. The boundary between the outer world and the inner world becomes increasingly thin. The cold wind, the silent ice, the limitless horizon, all of it begins to feel like an extension of your own awareness. You are no longer merely observing the environment. You are moving with it, breathing with it, drifting through its timeless stillness. And in this alignment, the nervous system settles even further, preparing the body and mind for deeper rest. The poles, in their unbroken quiet, guide you gently toward the slow descent of sleep. Beneath the frozen crust of the polar regions lies a world so hidden, so silent, that for most of human history it was thought impossible. For thousands of meters below Antarctica's icy surface, darkness reigns without interruption. Yet within this darkness are vast networks of subglacial lakes, liquid water sealed off for millions of years, protected by thick layers of ice and warmed only by the slow, patient heat rising from Earth's interior. These lakes are among the most isolated environments on the planet, untouched by sunlight, wind, or human presence. And yet, despite their stillness, they pulse with subtle forms of life. Microbial organisms drift in these lightless waters, surviving on faint chemical reactions, adapting to pressures and temperatures that would render most life inert. Their existence challenges our understanding of biology, revealing that life can persist even in conditions that seem inhospitable, quiet, and eternally cold. As scientists explore these hidden lakes, they discover ecosystems shaped not by sunlight, but by chemistry. Microbes feed on minerals, hydrogen, and trace compounds released from bedrock. In some lakes, the water is rich with dissolved gases, oxygen trapped long ago, slowly circulating through the depths. The organisms that live here form delicate networks of interaction, cycling nutrients through processes that unfold far more slowly than those on the surface. Evolution itself is drawn out over immense spans of time, producing life that changes not in generations, but in geological epochs. To study these organisms is to witness a patience that matches the ice above, a slow and deeply silent persistence. Even above the subglacial world, the ice itself hosts microscopic communities within its cold domains. Tiny channels called brine veins thread through the frozen matrix, holding pockets of salty liquid where microbes endure in low oxygen environments. These organisms enter states of extreme dormancy, slowing their metabolism to a near standstill. In this suspended condition, they can survive for decades, centuries, perhaps even millennia. Some scientists believe microbes preserved in ancient ice could offer clues to life on other frozen worlds, Europa, Enceladus, or distant exoplanets locked beneath icy shells. If life can sleep beneath Earth's glaciers, carried in the stillness of time, then perhaps the universe is more alive than we ever imagined. As we drift through these hidden realms, the mind begins to mirror the biological quiet beneath the ice. Thoughts settle into slower rhythms, mirroring the unhurried pace of subglacial life. Neural activity becomes more coordinated. Regions of the brain associated with sensory processing begin to dim. The pre-sleep state, a natural descent toward the hypnagogic threshold, grows stronger. This is the moment when the mind loosens its grip on the external world, retreating into a more fluid and introspective space. In this softened mental landscape, ideas blend into one another, merging gently, forming the beginnings of dreamlike imagery. Just as the organisms beneath the ice drift in slow, quiet currents, your awareness moves through its own gentle flow. Within this flow, time itself becomes difficult to measure. Moments lengthen, thoughts stretch into soft continuities, and the distinction between one idea and the next begins to dissolve. This sense of temporal expansion reflects changes in the thalamus, the brain's internal gatekeeper, which gradually reduces the flow of sensory information. As this happens, awareness becomes lighter, drifting toward the boundary where waking thought gives way to the first shadows of dreams. In this stage, the mind is both present and distant, awake enough to listen, yet relaxed enough to surrender. It is within this delicate balance that deep rest begins to take shape. And as you drift deeper into this inner stillness, you may notice a subtle truth. Beneath every layer of consciousness lies another, quieter layer, waiting patiently. Just as lakes hide beneath the ice, and microbes sleep within the frozen world, your mind holds its own hidden reservoirs of calm. Layers of thought, memory, and emotion, each more still than the last rest, silently beneath the surface. And as you sink gently toward these depths, guided by the serenity of the polar world, your awareness aligns with that ancient quiet, preparing you for the deeper descent to come. High above the frozen landscape, where silence meets the thin edge of the atmosphere, a strange and mesmerizing phenomenon unfolds: the auroras, the northern and southern lights. These luminous veils drift across the sky in colors that seem almost impossible: emerald greens, soft violets, shifting blues that ripple like fabric in an unseen wind. They are not merely visual displays, they are the Earth's magnetic field made visible, a gentle collision between solar particles and atmospheric gases. Each wave of light marks a moment where energy from the sun has traveled across millions of kilometers, only to be transformed into a delicate glow in the cold polar night. To witness this is to see the sky dreaming, breathing softly in patterns of light older than civilization itself. Auroras form when streams of charged particles, carried by the solar wind, reach Earth and are guided towards the poles by the planet's magnetic field. As they interact with oxygen and nitrogen in the upper atmosphere, photons are released, creating shimmering drapes of color. Oxygen glows green at lower altitudes and red at higher ones. Nitrogen adds purples and blues. The entire display dances with subtle variations, controlled by the invisible architecture of magnetic lines sweeping across the planet. Physicists describe these lights as signatures of the universe's quiet interplay between energy and matter, a cosmic whisper descending gently upon the night sky. For early explorers of the polar regions, the auroras were both haunting and comforting. They illuminated the dark winter months, casting soft, moving shadows across the ice. The lights seemed alive, reactive, responsive, as though the sky were aware of those who watched. In some moments, the colors expanded suddenly in brilliant sheets. In others, they curled inward, forming spirals that shimmered with gentle pulses. These lights, though silent, held immense power. They shaped mythology, guided travelers, and even influenced geomagnetic navigation long before their scientific origins were understood. Their presence reminded humans of their connection to the wider cosmos, even at the remote edges of the world. As the auroras drift overhead, the mind undergoes a gentle shift. Light that moves slowly across the visual field encourages the brain to synchronize with its rhythm. Eye movements become smooth and unhurried, triggering a cascade of relaxation signals through neural circuits. The occipital cortex, the region responsible for processing visual information, begins to settle into slower, more rhythmic patterns, similar to those that appear just before sleep. In this state, the mind becomes more receptive, more open, less concerned with the boundaries of waking life. The flowing colors invite awareness to drift, to move without direction, to soften into a state where thought dissolves into sensation. And as awareness drifts, the polar sky becomes not just a spectacle, but a mirror of the mind's own transition. The lights ripple like emerging dreams, faint images forming and dissolving at the edge of consciousness. Each wave of color reflects the movement of memory, imagination, and emotion within you. The greens evoke calm, the blues, depth, the violets, mystery. These associations are subtle but powerful, guiding the nervous system toward deeper parasympathetic activation, the biological counterpart of rest and recovery. In this gentle physiological shift, the body begins to release its tension. Breathing grows slower, and the boundary between thought and dream thins further. Eventually, As the lights soften into faint trails across the night sky, you may feel an inner quiet settling over you, a hush as gentle as snow falling on untouched ground. The auroras fade, but their rhythm remains within your awareness, slow, fluid, unhurried. It becomes the rhythm of your own breath, the rhythm of your own descent into rest. And as this rhythm deepens, you drift more easily into a state where the mind releases its grip on the waking world and begins its passage into the world of dreams. As we journey deeper into the polar regions, the nature of time itself begins to shift. In winter, the sun disappears for months, leaving behind an unbroken night that stretches across the frozen landscape like a vast cosmic curtain. This darkness is not empty. It is full of quiet subtleties, gradients of shadow, faint reflections from distant stars, the soft luminance of snow absorbing what little light reaches it. In such prolonged night, human perception changes. Without sunrise or sunset, the usual cues that synchronize our internal clocks fade away, and the body must rely on more delicate rhythms, the slow pulse of melatonin, the whisper of the circadian cycle, the hidden timing mechanisms embedded deep within the brain. Scientists who study the polar night describe it as a natural laboratory for understanding the biology of sleep. In the absence of daylight, the pineal gland increases its secretion of melatonin, encouraging the body toward deeper rest. The brain becomes more sensitive to subtle signals, cool temperatures, the softness of darkness, the repetitive sounds of wind and distant ice. All of these factors promote a shift toward lower frequency brainwaves, those same gentle oscillations that mark the transition from wakefulness into sleep. And just as the glacial world moves with slow, deliberate patience, the mind begins to mirror this rhythm, settling into a state where thoughts lengthen, soften, and eventually dissolve. In this endless night, even the animals of the polar regions have adapted in remarkable ways. Arctic foxes adjust their activity patterns not according to daylight, but according to subtle changes in temperature and prey availability. Penguins synchronize their breeding cycles with the faint glow of twilight that precedes the returning sun. Whales navigate through the dark waters beneath frozen seas using complex networks of sound, deep, resonant calls that travel for kilometers through the quiet depths. These adaptations reveal a profound truth. Life does not rely solely on light. It responds to patterns, to cycles, to rhythms far older and quieter than the rising sun. As we drift through the polar night, the mind becomes more sensitive to its own inner landscape. The absence of external stimulation allows the thalamus, the brain's sensory gatekeeper, to lower its guard. Sounds become softer, more distant. Visual perception fades into gentle abstraction. The world outside feels muted, almost dreamlike, as though wrapped in layers of snow. In this softened state, the prefrontal cortex responsible for planning, organizing, and conscious control begins to relax its hold. This release allows deeper brain structures, particularly those involved in memory and emotion, to rise quietly into awareness, forming slow waves of sensation and imagery. These slow waves resemble the early stages of sleep, where consciousness begins to loosen and the mind drifts between worlds. Thoughts no longer form sharp edges. They blend into impressions, textures, fragments of memory. Breathing becomes smoother, deeper. Muscles release their tension with each exhale. This is the beginning of true rest, where the body's internal rhythms begin to align with the vast, unhurried calm of the environment. The polar night, in its endless quiet, gently draws the mind toward this threshold, where waking thought fades and the dream state begins to take form. And as awareness continues to soften, you may feel a subtle shift inside you, a sense of drifting, of being carried by something steady and ancient. The darkness no longer feels empty, it feels protective, like a blanket woven from silence and time. It holds you, surrounds you, and supports the descent into deeper rest. In this moment, the boundary between the self and the world blurs. You are not simply observing the polar night, you are moving within it, wrapped in its slow, rhythmic breath. And with each passing moment, you drift closer to the comfortable edge of sleep. Beneath the vast sheets of polar ice lies an ocean whose movements are almost imperceptible, so slow, so restrained, that they resemble the deep, steady pulse of a sleeping planet. The water here is colder, denser, and more pristine than anywhere else on Earth. As surface water freezes, the salt is pushed downward, creating currents that sink, spread, and circulate through the global ocean like silent arteries. These deep currents form part of the thermohaline circulation, a planetary conveyor belt that redistributes heat across continents, stabilizing climates and sustaining marine life thousands of kilometers away. Scientists sometimes call this system the heartbeat of the ocean, because its rhythm is essential for life across the planet. In the polar seas, this heartbeat is especially slow and deliberate. When seawater cools to near freezing temperatures, it becomes heavy and sinks into the abyss, carrying oxygen to some of the deepest regions of the ocean. This simple exchange, cold water descending, warm water rising, creates a cycle that can take centuries to complete. The calm surface of the polar ocean hides this immense, quiet power. Beneath the ice, currents glide through darkness in patient loops, touching ecosystems no human eye has ever seen. Their movement is subtle, persistent, and wonderfully balanced, reminding us that even the coldest environments are full of life-sustaining motion. Within these icy waters, extraordinary creatures drift and glide with effortless grace. Transparent jellyfish pulse with a soft, ghostly rhythm. Tiny krill gather in shimmering clouds. Seals slip between fractures in the ice with a smooth, fluid elegance. Even the great whales, blue, fin, and humpback, navigate through these frigid depths, guided by memory, magnetic fields, and the low-frequency songs that travel for vast distances through the cold water. These creatures thrive in an environment shaped not by sunlight, but by temperature, pressure, and the quiet constancy of the sea. Their presence reveals the adaptability of life and the profound stillness that can exist even within motion. As we drift deeper into this underwater world, the mind begins to reflect its gentle, rhythmic patterns. The slow, steady movement of deep ocean currents mirrors the body's natural shift toward rest. Breathing synchronizes with the imagined flow, long inhales rising like warm water ascending toward the surface, long exhales sinking like cold currents descending into the abyss. This rhythmic breathing activates parasympathetic pathways, allowing the heart rate to slow and the muscles to release their final traces of tension. In this physiological quiet, thoughts adopt the character of the ocean itself, smooth, continuous, and unhurried. With external stimulation fading, internal perception becomes more vivid. You may sense a widening inside the mind, like an expanding underwater cavern. Thoughts drift past, suspended in the calm darkness. Images rise gently from memory, float for a moment, then dissolve again into the deep. This is the hypnagogic threshold, the quiet transition between wakefulness and dreams, where the brain's sensory filters loosen and imagination begins to flow freely. Just as marine currents reshape the ocean floor over centuries, these slow mental currents carve pathways into rest, guiding awareness toward an ever deeper stillness. And as you drift with these imagined currents, you may feel yourself becoming part of the same vast, patient rhythm that governs the frozen seas. The boundaries of the body soften, awareness expands, and the sense of self becomes light, buoyant, drifting, carried along by something timeless. The deep ocean, though cold and dark, feels calming, protective, almost tender. It holds you in a gentle suspension, allowing the mind to sink naturally towards sleep. In its quiet pulse, you find your own rhythm steady, peaceful, and ready for the deeper descent ahead. At the core of the polar ice sheets lies a realm where time slows into an almost physical presence. Every meter of ice represents decades, centuries, even millennia of accumulated snowfall compressed, compacted, and preserved in crystalline layers. When scientists drill deep into these frozen archives, they are not simply retrieving ice, they are pulling long, continuous scrolls of planetary history from the Earth's memory. Each thin, translucent layer corresponds to a year of snowfall. Thicker layers reveal warmer periods, thinner layers, colder ones. Dust trapped within the ice marks volcanic eruptions, desert winds, and ancient storms. In this way, the glaciers become record keepers, silent observers that have watched continents shift, climates change, and civilizations rise and fall. Deep within these layers, pressure shapes the ice into something almost otherworldly. At great depths, the weight of the overlying snow compresses the ice so tightly that air bubbles, tiny pockets of ancient atmosphere, flatten into elongated lenses. The molecules themselves reorganize into delicate patterns, crystal lattices shifting under the immense force of time. The temperature is stable, cold, and unchanging. In this frozen heart, no external sound penetrates, no light filters down. It is a world so still that scientists describe it as the closest thing on Earth to geological sleep, a prolonged, suspended state where movement is nearly impossible and time seems to thicken into a dense physical form. Yet, even in this stillness, the ice is not entirely lifeless. Chemical reactions continue slowly over centuries, adjusting the composition of the air trapped within. Traces of ancient microbes remain frozen in place, suspended in a state of near-perfect preservation. Their structures hint at life forms that endured past ice ages, adapting to conditions colder and harsher than anything humans have ever experienced. These frozen remnants remind us that life can extend through time not only by growth and change, but by waiting patiently, silently, until conditions return that allow it to flourish once more. As we visualize these deep glacial layers, the mind begins to adopt their same slow, steady rhythm. Thoughts become layered, drifting gently one atop another. Memories rise like faint, translucent bands, some thick with emotion, others delicate and nearly transparent. They form a quiet stratigraphy within awareness, a personal archive of experiences preserved in the stillness of the mind. With each breath, you settle deeper into this inner landscape, your thoughts becoming softer, quieter, more spacious. This mental descent mirrors the physiological shift toward deeper stages of rest, where brainwave activity slows and the body prepares for the healing processes of sleep. In these slower brain states, the boundaries between moments begin to blur. Time stretches out, expanding into long, continuous impressions rather than distinct events. This is the cognitive analog of descending into the glacial heart, where time feels thick, weighty, and deeply still. The mind releases its usual sense of urgency, allowing thoughts to drift without direction or expectation. In this unhurried space, you may feel a gentle detachment from the waking world, as though sinking slowly into a calm, protective environment that holds you with steady, ancient patience. And as you drift deeper into this mental stillness, you may notice a subtle sensation, an awareness of being suspended, held, and supported by something vast and quiet. Just as glaciers carry the weight of centuries with calm endurance, your own mind carries its experiences without strain, allowing you to rest within their layered depths. In this moment, you are no longer moving through the glacial world. The glacial world is moving through you, guiding you gently toward the deepest stages of rest. Far beneath the frozen soils of the Arctic lies a strange and ancient layer known as permafrost, Earth's longest unchanged terrain, a world locked in cold stillness for tens of thousands of years. Permafrost is more than frozen dirt. It is a complex structure of ice, sediment, plant material, and ancient organic matter held in a kind of suspended animation. Some of the material preserved within its depths predates human civilization by millennia. Scientists describe permafrost as a frozen library of ecosystems, containing seeds, pollen, microbes, and even the remains of extinct animals untouched by decay. Like pages of a book sealed by ice, each layer encases a fragment of Earth's distant past. Within these frozen layers, the rules of biology slow to their quietest pace. Microorganisms that would ordinarily grow and divide in days instead survive in states of deep dormancy, their metabolism reduced to the faintest flicker. Chemical reactions that would normally take seconds can unfold over centuries. This extraordinary slowness reveals something profound, that life is not defined solely by its movement or activity, but by its capacity to endure, to persist gently through time, awaiting the right conditions to awaken again. In this way, the frozen soil behaves almost like a vast, sleeping organism, still, patient, and quietly alive beneath the surface. As global temperatures shift, scientists have begun to observe new behaviors within the permafrost. Frozen layers expand and contract with subtle changes in heat, creating intricate networks of ice wedges and crystalline veins. When these veins form, they can stretch for meters beneath the ground, creating geometric patterns that resemble the slow, deliberate respiration of the Earth itself. Each seasonal freeze and thaw alters the structure of the soil, allowing water to seep into cracks, freeze again, and reshape the landscape in cycles that echo the slow pulse of geological time. These transformations occur almost imperceptibly, yet over centuries they sculpt entire valleys, plateaus, and river systems. In imagining these long, unhurried cycles, the mind begins to shift into its own version of slow time. Thoughts stretch gently across broader intervals, forming smooth connections rather than abrupt conclusions. Awareness expands, filling with a muted spaciousness, similar to the quiet beneath the frozen soil. Neural activity in the default mode network, the system responsible for introspection, memory, and imagination, becomes more pronounced during this state, allowing the mind to wander in soft, fluid patterns. The edges of consciousness blur, forming a gentle continuum between the present moment and the drifting landscape of inner experience. As this mental drift deepens, the body responds. Muscles release their final traces of tension. The nervous system shifts further into parasympathetic dominance, promoting rest, recovery, and the biological preparation for sleep. Breathing becomes slow and rhythmic, aligning with the imagined cycles of freeze and thaw that shape the permafrost. Each inhale feels like a subtle expansion, each exhale a soft settling into stillness. This rhythm mirrors the slow metabolism of the frozen earth, unhurried, conserved, profoundly calm. And as you sink deeper into this state, you may feel a quiet kinship with the frozen world itself. Just as permafrost holds ancient life in silent continuity, your mind holds layers of memory and emotion preserved, waiting, resting beneath the surface. These layers do not demand attention. They simply exist, quietly informing who you are. As you drift into deeper rest, you allow these layers to settle, undisturbed, content to remain in their gentle stillness. And in this shared quiet, Earth's and your own, the transition towards sleep feels natural, inevitable, and deeply soothing. In the frozen polar regions, where the air is clear and cold enough to sharpen even the faintest rays of light, one of the Earth's most subtle illusions begins to unfold: the polar mirage. Here, light bends gently through layers of air at different temperatures, creating visions that hover just above the horizon, distant mountains that appear where none exist, ships lifted into the air, islands stretched into impossible shapes. This phenomenon, known as looming, is not a trick of the eye, but a delicate negotiation between temperature and light. Cold air near the surface bends incoming rays upward, allowing observers to see far beyond the curvature of the Earth. To stand within this phenomenon is to feel reality softening at the edges, as though the world itself were drifting into a dreamlike state. These mirages can be incredibly detailed, forming shimmering structures that mimic real landscapes. Occasionally, a rare form known as the Fata Morgana emerges, an intricate stacking of distorted images that ripple and shift with the slightest change in air temperature. Scientists explain that these illusions are born from vertical gradients of density within the atmosphere, where layers of warm and cold air alternate like faint, invisible sheets. Light passing through them is stretched and folded, creating complex reflections that seem to float above the icy horizon. In this way, the landscape becomes a canvas upon which the sky paints temporary shapes, fragile, silent, and forever on the edge of disappearing. For centuries, explorers of the polar regions interpreted these shifting visions with awe. Some mistook them for distant landmasses, guiding expeditions toward places that vanished upon approach. Others saw them as signs of hidden worlds or gateways beyond the known. Even today, these illusions remind us how the boundaries of perception depend on the environment. In the still, cold air, the world appears to breathe and flex, revealing the interplay between physical reality and the mind's own interpretive tendencies. Light becomes a storyteller, bending and shaping itself into silent narratives across the frozen horizon. As we visualize these illusions, the mind begins to mimic their softness. Awareness stretches, elongates, and shifts, much like the bent rays of light. Thoughts that once held firm, outlines begin to blur into gentler shapes. The pre-sleep mind often creates its own internal mirages, floating images, abstract impressions, soft visions that rise unbidden from the subconscious. These early hypnagogic forms are the brain's natural response to reduced sensory input and slowed neural activity. Just as light bends through stratified air, thought bends through the layered pathways of memory and imagination. With each breath, these inner images grow softer, drifting at the edge of awareness. Neurologically, this corresponds to the brain transitioning from beta waves to slower alpha and theta rhythm states associated with creativity, relaxation, and the earlier stages of dreaming. These rhythms are fluid, matching the motion of the imagined mirages that shimmer across the polar horizon. In this state, the mind is neither fully awake nor fully asleep. It hovers in a delicate in-between space where ideas lose their rigidity and transform into pure sensation. And as you drift deeper into this liminal space, you may feel the same serenity that accompanies the polar mirage, an awareness that the world, both inner and outer, is capable of becoming softer, more fluid, more spacious. Boundaries blur, shapes shift, tension melts into quiet openness. You are not losing clarity. You are gaining a gentler form of perception, one that allows you to rest in a state of effortless calm. In this softened awareness, the descent into deeper rest becomes natural, smooth, and inviting, much like the silent bending of light across the frozen poles. Across the vast polar landscapes, every shape carved into the ice, every ridge, valley, and frozen wave has been sculpted over unimaginable spans of time. Glacial evolution is not a process of days or years, but of millennia. Snowfalls stacked gently, layer by layer, compressing into dense ice that creeps across the land with a patience unmatched by any other natural force. In this slow movement, the ice records everything: shifts in temperature, ancient storms, volcanic ash drifting from distant continents. The glaciers become memory itself, an archive of Earth's past preserved in cold, crystalline form. To study them is to read a story written not in ink, but in layers of frozen time. As these glaciers advance and retreat, they shape the world in ways that feel both deliberate and serene. Their weight presses down on the crust beneath them, causing the land to sink slowly. When the ice melts centuries later, the land rises again with equal patience, a process known as isostatic rebound. This gentle rising can continue for thousands of years, long after the glaciers have vanished. Scientists describe this motion as the Earth breathing, inhaling under the weight of ice and exhaling once the pressure lifts. It is a reminder that even the solid ground beneath us moves with quiet rhythms, responding to forces we rarely notice. Hidden deep within the ice, tiny imperfections known as inclusions reveal a surprising complexity. These microscopic particles, dust, pollen, salt crystals, even fragments of meteorites, serve as markers within the frozen timeline. They allow scientists to trace climate cycles, atmospheric changes, and long-forgotten environmental shifts. A grain of pollen embedded thousands of meters below the surface might reveal a warm period from 40,000 years ago. A thin layer of volcanic ash may point to an eruption in a distant region long before modern humans walked the Earth. Every inclusion is a whisper from the past, preserved in perfect stillness. As you imagine these layers and the delicate records they contain, your mind begins to adopt the same gentle stratification. Thoughts settle into soft tears, memories drift upward like faint particles suspended in ice, and the deeper layers of awareness reveal themselves slowly, without urgency. This mental descent mirrors the brain's natural progression toward deep rest, where patterns of activity shift from surface-level cognition to the quiet, spacious processing of subconscious regions. In this state, neural oscillations slow, forming smooth, synchronized waves that resemble the long, continuous lines within a glacier core. With each breath, you move deeper into this layered stillness. Inhales rise like newly fallen snow. Exhales settle like ancient layers compressing into crystalline memory. The rhythm is slow, balanced, and deeply comforting. The prefrontal cortex, the seat of planning and analysis, softens its activity, allowing deeper emotional and sensory regions to guide the mind inward. This shift prepares the body for the transition from wakeful consciousness into the restorative darkness of sleep, where memories consolidate and the mind reorganizes itself quietly, just as ice forms new layers through slow, persistent accumulation. And as this inner quiet deepens, you may feel as though your awareness is sinking gently through layers of time, through thoughts from today, from this week, from years past. Each layer becomes softer as you move downward, more spacious, more peaceful. Eventually, you reach a point where the layers dissolve altogether, merging into a single deep stillness. This is the glacial heart of your own consciousness, a place of rest untouched by the noise of daily life. Here, in this calm and ancient silence, the mind is free to drift, unburdened, into the depths of sleep. At the margins of the polar regions, where ice meets open sea, a delicate boundary forms a shifting frontier known as the marginal ice zone. Here, frozen sheets fracture into floating plates that drift with the wind and tide, creaking softly as they collide. The ocean swells beneath them like a slow, rhythmic breath, lifting the ice and lowering it again in long, gentle pulses. This place is neither entirely water nor entirely ice. It is a fluid transition between states, a liminal world whose edges move with the subtle balance of temperature, wind, and ocean currents. Scientists describe this frontier as one of the most dynamic environments on Earth, a region where small changes ripple outward to influence ecosystems and climate patterns far beyond the poles. Within this shifting boundary, sunlight behaves in mesmerizing ways. When low-angle rays strike the broken ice, they scatter through the crystalline surfaces, producing glimmers of pink, gold, and violet that shimmer across the waves. The effect resembles a silent mosaic, fragments of light dancing between fragments of ice. Beneath the surface, the cold, clear water acts like a lens, reflecting colors upward in soft gradients that seem almost unreal. These luminous displays reveal the intricate geometry of the ice, its ridges, air pockets, and tiny fractures etched by time and temperature. To witness this interplay between light and water is to see the world express its quiet artistry, crafting beauty from cold and motion. The marginal ice zone is also a cradle of life. Here, microscopic algae cling to the underside of the ice, forming vast, delicate blooms that sustain entire food webs. Zooplankton gather in shimmering clouds, feeding on these algae and drifting with the tides. Fish, seals, and whales move along this frontier in search of nourishment, following the subtle shifts of temperature that guide their migration routes. Even seabirds depend on this region, diving between the floating plates to catch fish that rise toward the surface. It is a place where life thrives not in spite of the cold, but because of it, where the boundaries between solid and liquid create environments rich in nutrients and opportunity. As you imagine this fluid frontier, the mind begins to mirror its gentle transitions. Thoughts that once felt rigid or solid become softer, more flexible. Awareness begins to shift effortlessly between internal and external sensations, much like ice drifting between states of water and solid form. Neurologically, this reflects a deepening relaxation response. Alpha and theta brain waves harmonize, allowing the mind to explore memories, emotions, and sensations without the constraints of conscious control. The boundary between awareness and rest becomes porous, allowing you to drift gradually toward the threshold of sleep. Breathing becomes smoother, matching the slow rhythm of waves lifting sheets of ice. Each inhale rises like a swell, each exhale settles like a drifting flow coming to rest. The nervous system responds with increasing calm, releasing tension in the chest, shoulders, neck, and jaw. This physiological softening mirrors the quiet settling of ice within the marginal zone, where movement gradually yields to stillness, and stillness yields to gentle motion. In this balanced space, the mind finds safety in calm transition, preparing itself for the deeper descent that follows. And as this quiet transition completes within you, a profound stillness takes hold. The edges of thought dissolve, replaced by drifting impressions, soft lights, gentle motions, distant echoes of imagery that feel both familiar and strange. These are the earliest shapes of dreaming, forming like fragile ice plates on the surface of a quiet sea. They hover at the boundary of consciousness, inviting you to let go, to drift, to surrender to the slow, steady rhythm of rest. And as you follow this rhythm, the frontier between waking and sleep becomes as delicate and beautiful as the shimmering edge of the polar world. Across the polar continents lie massive rivers of ice glaciers so vast and ancient that they seem immovable at first glance. But beneath their frozen surfaces, a subtle and ceaseless motion unfolds. Glaciers flow slowly under their own immense weight, creeping across bedrock with a patience that defies human perception. Some advance only a few centimeters each day, while others surge unexpectedly, accelerating their movement over weeks or months. These ice giants are shaped by gravity, pressure, and time itself, behaving like slow, silent tides that carve the Earth's surface in ways both gentle and profound. To observe them is to witness movement stretched across centuries, motion so gradual that it feels like the Earth's own version of breathing. As glaciers move, they sculpt landscapes through a process known as glacial erosion. Rocks become polished to a smooth sheen, valleys deepen into U-shaped basins. Entire fjords are carved into the coastline, by the slow passage of ice. These transformations are the result of immense forces held within the quietest of environments. At the glacier's base, meltwater lubricates the boundary between ice and rock, allowing the entire structure to slide with greater ease. Debris carried within the ice acts like sandpaper, grinding the land beneath it. Over thousands of years, this slow abrasion creates terrain that tells the story of glacial journeys long past frozen evidence of a world reshaped in delicate, patient motion. Inside the glacier, the structure of the ice reveals even more complexity. Layers of snow accumulated over centuries compress into dense, interlocking crystals that flow like a slow liquid under pressure. Deep within, the ice becomes so compact that trapped air forms thin bands of blue light when illuminated. Crevasses open and close with shifting stress, forming intricate networks of fractures that echo through the ice like muted whispers. These internal patterns behave as natural archives of stress, temperature, and motion records of how the glacier has evolved through time. Scientists often refer to glaciers as frozen rivers, but in truth, they are more like vast crystalline mines holding memories of every season they have survived. As you envision this slow, deliberate movement, the mind begins to adopt its cadence. Thoughts stretch out, elongating like the glacial flow. Each idea glides gently into the next, without friction or urgency. The neural pathways responsible for wakeful attention gradually release their hold, allowing deeper, more intuitive networks to guide awareness. This shift reflects the brain's transition toward theta-dominant activity, a frequency associated with calm introspection, early dreaming, and the first stages of true rest. Just as glaciers move in response to pressure and gravity, your mind begins to move in response to stillness and breath. Breathing becomes part of this rhythm. Each inhale expands gently, like a glacier accumulating layers of snow. Each exhale settles, like ice compressing under its own weight. This repetitive, grounding rhythm activates parasympathetic pathways, lowering heart rate and preparing the body for sleep. Muscles soften, tension dissolves, and awareness drifts into a wider, slower field, mirroring the vastness of ice stretching across the polar landscape. The mind settles into a restful glide, moving effortlessly through layers of thought, emotion, and sensation. And as you continue to drift with this glacial rhythm, you may feel yourself becoming lighter, quieter, more open. The slow movement of the glaciers becomes the slow movement of your own awareness, steady, continuous, unhurried. Thoughts that once felt heavy begin to melt into softness. Memories transform into gentle impressions. The waking world fades, replaced by a profound stillness that feels ancient and comforting. In this state, you are no longer separate from the frozen giants. You move with them, breathe with them, rest with them. And their patient descent becomes your own, guiding you deeper into the tranquil depths of sleep. In the highest latitudes of the world, where the air is so cold and dry that sound itself behaves differently, the atmosphere becomes an invisible architecture of stillness. Molecules move more slowly here, carrying fewer vibrations, softening every whisper of wind and movement. This reduction in sound transmission creates an environment where even the smallest noise feels distant, muted, and suspended in space. Scientists describe this acoustic quiet as a natural attenuation field, where the atmosphere absorbs sound rather than reflecting it. To exist within such silence is to feel wrapped in an intangible blanket, one woven from cold, slow-moving air and vast, empty horizons. This altered atmosphere also influences the way pressure is distributed across the landscape. Cold air is denser, sinking toward the Earth's surface and forming stable layers that can persist for days or weeks. These layers prevent turbulence, creating an unusual steadiness in the air. Even strong winds glide smoothly above the ice, producing long, uniform currents that stretch across hundreds of kilometers. In this sense, the polar atmosphere behaves like a vast, restrained ocean of air, calm at the surface, quietly flowing beneath. Such stability makes the poles ideal laboratories for studying atmospheric physics, where phenomena like temperature inversions and pressure gradients reveal themselves with elegant clarity. Higher in the atmosphere, the cold introduces additional phenomena. Ice crystals form intricate hexagonal shapes that float gently through the air, creating halos, pillars, and arcs of light around the sun and moon. These optical effects, known as atmospheric ice halos, appear like luminous gateways suspended in the sky. They occur when light refracts through crystalline air, bending into symmetrical rings or vertical columns that shimmer with faint, ethereal hues. For observers, these halos evoke a sense of cosmic geometry, as though the sky were revealing its underlying structure through soft, radiant symbols drawn in frozen air. As your mind visualizes these atmospheric layers and their delicate interactions, awareness begins to quiet in a similar way. Mental turbulence fades. Thoughts settle into smooth currents, drifting without interruption. The brain's sensory pathways, receiving fewer external cues, gradually release their hold on alertness. This shift corresponds to the onset of deeper relaxation, when alpha waves soften into slower theta rhythms, and consciousness becomes fluid, expansive, and unhurried. In this state, the mind mirrors the atmospheric stillness of the poles, adopting its stability, its calm, its effortless tranquility. Breathing becomes part of this atmospheric rhythm. Inhale gently, allowing air to cool the mind. Exhale slowly, allowing the warm breath to dissipate into the imagined cold. Each cycle becomes a microcosm of the polar atmosphere. Calm, predictable, soothing. Muscles release tension in small, incremental waves, first in the shoulders, then the neck, then the face. The body feels heavier, grounded, secure. The nervous system shifts into deeper parasympathetic activation, preparing for the restorative descent into sleep. It is a physiological echo of the still, dense air pressing softly upon the landscape. And as this inner stillness deepens, you may feel a sensation of being held by the atmosphere itself, not pushed, not pulled, but gently supported. The quiet becomes a presence. The slow air becomes a companion. The vastness of the polar world expands within you, creating space for rest to unfold naturally. In this moment, the mind begins to drift freely, carried on the soft currents of imagined cold and silence. You are no longer observing the polar atmosphere, you are breathing with it, settling into its steady calm, preparing to descend even deeper into the quiet depths of sleep. Deep beneath the glacial surface, hidden from sunlight and untouched by the warmth of seasons, exist vast networks of ice caves, silent blue cathedrals formed by meltwater, pressure, and time. These caverns are sculpted by the gentle flow of subglacial streams and by the gradual shifting of ice itself. Their walls glow with shades of sapphire and turquoise, illuminated by the faintest scattering of light penetrating from above. Here, sound is absorbed completely, creating an environment so quiet that even your own breathing feels distant. Scientists who explore these caverns describe them as portals into another world, a world where the ordinary rules of light and sound seem suspended, replaced by an otherworldly calm. Within these caves, the ice behaves like a living material. Pressure causes it to deform, stretch, and fold into delicate patterns resembling frozen waves. Air trapped inside forms shimmering pockets that create soft, glowing textures beneath the surface. These structures reveal the history of the glacier itself, the seasonal layers, the stress of movement, the subtle currents of meltwater shaping new paths in the darkness. Some caves change within hours as temperatures shift, others remain stable for decades, preserving their ancient architecture in perfect stillness. This transience reminds scientists that even the most solid, unyielding ice is always in slow transformation, a frozen body quietly reshaping itself from within. Water plays a profound role in this hidden world. As meltwater trickles through channels carved by pressure, it produces faint, resonant tones that echo softly through the cavern. These sounds are subtle, more vibration than noise, yet they reveal essential information about the glacier's internal anatomy. The pitch and rhythm of the water can indicate the thickness of nearby ice, the temperature of the cave walls, or the pressure of meltwater reservoirs accumulating deep within. Researchers often describe listening to these tones as hearing the glacier breathe a slow, rhythmic exhale formed over thousands of years. As you imagine these glowing blue caverns, the mind begins to descend into its own inner spaces, quiet chambers shaped by memory, imagination, and emotion. Thoughts echo with the same gentle resonance as the water within the ice caves. The boundaries of awareness soften, allowing images to drift slowly across the mind's surface. The internal chatter of the waking world fades into a distant hum. This descent reflects the transition into deeper states of rest, when neural pathways shift from conscious processing to the fluid, drifting patterns associated with early dream formation. Breathing settles into a deeper rhythm. Each inhale feels like stepping into a chamber of cool, calming light. Each exhale dissolves tension, allowing the mind to expand gently into the surrounding stillness. Muscle tension releases in cascading waves, beginning at the center of the body and extending outward into the limbs. In this state, the brain's thalamocortical circuits slow their activity, reducing sensory input and encouraging the mind to withdraw inward. The experience mirrors the quiet isolation of the ice caves, protected, serene, enclosed by a gentle blue calm. And as this inner descent deepens, you may feel a sense of floating within these imagined caverns, weightless, suspended in a world where time moves slowly and silence reigns. The soft glow of the ice becomes a metaphor for the mind's own quiet illumination, a gentle light that guides you deeper into rest. In this state, you are no longer exploring the ice caves. You are becoming part of their stillness. The tranquility that fills them becomes the tranquility that surrounds you, preparing your awareness for the deeper, more restorative stages of sleep. Far beneath the frozen seas and deep within the winter months when the sun disappears entirely, the polar world enters a darkness so complete that it transforms the rules of life. In this extended night, organisms rely not on light, but on faint biological signals, movement, temperature, pressure, and rare bursts of bioluminescence. Many creatures in these depths have evolved eyes that detect the slightest glimmer, or bodies that produce their own soft glow. These bioluminescent pulses drift like underwater stars, illuminating the darkness with gentle flashes. Scientists studying these flickers describe them as the heartbeat of the deep, brief, delicate messages exchanged in a world where silence and darkness dominate. The creatures that inhabit this realm, certain species of fish, jellyfish, and plankton, emit light through chemical reactions involving luciferin and luciferase. These reactions produce blue-green glows that travel far through the cold water, allowing communication, camouflage, and navigation. In near-total darkness, these signals become the foundation of survival, shaping delicate ecosystems that flourish without sunlight. It is a reminder that life, even in its faintest form, persistently finds a way to express itself quietly, gracefully, and with profound beauty. The polar deep becomes a stage where light is not commonplace but precious, emerging only when needed, like a whispered conversation in an otherwise silent chamber. Above these depths, the ice itself carries subtle signatures of life. Microbes embedded in the ice produce trace gases, tiny chemical fingerprints that reveal metabolic processes unfolding at astonishingly slow rates. Some of these organisms generate faint heat, just enough to alter microscopic ice structures around them. Others release pigments that tint their environment with hints of red, orange, or yellow, forming what scientists call watermelon snow, a visual sign that even in cold, remote landscapes, biology continues to persist. These life forms exist at the threshold between activity and dormancy, embodying a form of patience that mirrors the frozen world around them. As we imagine these faint biological signals, soft glimmers in the dark, gentle chemical breaths within the ice, the mind begins to attune to subtlety. Awareness shifts from broad, sweeping thoughts to fine, delicate impressions. Your attention becomes more sensitive, noticing the small spaces between thoughts, the quiet pauses between breaths. This heightened sensitivity marks a key transition in the descent towards sleep, the moment when the analytical mind begins to loosen, allowing intuitive and subconscious processes to rise gently into awareness. Neurologically, this corresponds to increasing theta activity, the gateway to the dream state. Your breathing slows further, becoming rhythmic and gentle. Inhales drift softly upward, like faint pulses of bioluminescent light rising through dark water. Exhales sink downward, releasing tension into the quiet depths of the body. With each cycle, the nervous system shifts deeper into parasympathetic calm. Muscles soften, eyelids grow heavier, and the boundary between waking and dreaming becomes thin and translucent. The sensations of the body recede into the background, leaving only a soft hum of comfort and warmth. And as awareness continues to settle, a profound stillness emerges, an inner darkness that feels safe, expansive, and welcoming. This darkness is not emptiness, it is potential, a quiet space where dreams begin to form. It mirrors the polar night, where even without sunlight, life persists through gentle signals, soft glimmers, and patient rhythms. You may feel yourself drifting, carried by these faint pulses into deeper rest. The quiet signals of the polar world become the quiet signals of your own mind, guiding you toward the deep restorative sleep that awaits. Across the vast polar landscapes, snow is not merely a blanket covering the ground. It is a complex and delicate geometry shaped by temperature, humidity, and wind. Each snowflake begins as a microscopic crystal forming around a dust particle suspended in the air. As it falls, it grows intricate patterns, hexagons, dendrites, hollow columns, and delicate plates. Scientists have documented more than 30 distinct types of snow crystals, each formed under unique atmospheric conditions. These shapes are so sensitive to temperature that a difference of 1 degree can alter their structure entirely. To imagine millions of these crystals drifting silently across the polar sky is to witness a natural symphony of geometry, unfolding molecule by molecule, guided by nothing more than air and cold. When snow settles on the ground, its structure transforms again. Tiny pockets of air become trapped between crystals, creating layers that insulate the earth and mute sound. This is why footsteps in fresh polar snow seem to disappear almost instantly, absorbed by the intricate lattice of ice and air beneath your feet. Acoustic scientists call this phenomenon sound deadening, a quality that turns the vast tundra into one of the quietest environments on Earth. In such deep silence, even the faintest movement feels magnified, yet paradoxically softer, as though the world is wrapped in a cushion of stillness. This quiet has profound psychological effects, calming the nervous system and lowering activity in the amygdala, the brain's center for vigilance. The wind plays a gentle sculptural role as it passes across these crystalline fields. It carves the snow into elongated ridges known as sastrugi and sweeps fine grains into delicate waves that resemble the ripples of a frozen ocean. These formations capture the memory of the wind itself, its speed, its direction, its shifting moods etched into the landscape like signatures. Over time, sastrugi sharpen or smooth depending on the season, forming a natural record that scientists can read like a diary written in snow. This interplay between air and crystal produces a world that is constantly changing, yet always quiet, always restrained, always drifting gently between stillness and motion. As you visualize this delicate geometry, millions of crystals forming, drifting, and settling into soft silence, the mind begins to mirror its structure. Thoughts become lighter, more spacious, separating into soft, crystalline impressions. Complex ideas reduce themselves into simple, quiet forms, drifting gently across awareness. This mental softening marks a deepening stage of relaxation, where cognitive load diminishes and the brain transitions further into slower, more synchronized rhythms. It is here, in this gentle cognitive snowfall, that early dream imagery often begins to surface, floating, dissolving, reappearing with the soft unpredictability of drifting snow. Breathing aligns naturally with this imagery. Each inhale rises like a snowflake lifted briefly by a breeze. Each exhale settles like a crystal falling back to the earth. Muscles loosen with each breath, easing into a state of profound comfort. The sensory world becomes muted, just as sound is muted in a snow-covered landscape. Even the pulse slows slightly, responding to the parasympathetic calm that snow imagery often evokes. The body begins to feel heavier, grounded, yet the mind feels lighter, as though thoughts are gently falling around you, coming to rest in perfect, peaceful silence. And as this inner snowfall deepens, you may feel yourself merging with the quiet landscape you've been imagining. The silence of the polar world becomes the silence of your own mind. Thoughts drift to stillness, emotions settle, and awareness begins to hover at the threshold of dreams. Nothing pulls you back, nothing urges you forward. You simply drift, like a single snowflake descending through a calm winter night, unhurried, peaceful, and completely ready for the deeper rest that awaits you. Beneath the frozen surface of the polar regions, far below the layers of snow, ice, and permafrost, lies a faint but persistent warmth rising slowly from the Earth's interior. This geothermal energy, though subtle, plays an essential role in shaping the frozen world above. It forms pockets of liquid water beneath thick glaciers, fuels subglacial lakes that remain unfrozen for millions of years, and provides the minimal heat necessary for certain microbial life to endure. Scientists describe this process as the thermal breath of the Earth, a slow, continuous exhalation of heat that interacts with the cold surface in delicate and surprising ways. This interplay between warmth and ice creates dynamic systems hidden from the human eye, systems that move quietly in the dark. In some regions of Antarctica, geothermal heat is strong enough to form large cavernous spaces beneath the ice. These hidden chambers can stretch for kilometers, shaped by bubbling vents and warm rock far below. Inside them, temperatures can be surprisingly mild compared to the world above, allowing ice to melt and refreeze in intricate formations. These structures are ghostly and elegant, their walls illuminated by soft reflections of trapped light filtering through layers of ice. Researchers who explore them describe a sensation of stepping into a living organism, warmth pulsing gently beneath cold skin, shifting and breathing in a rhythm millions of years old. This geothermal energy also influences the movement of glaciers. As the base melts and refreezes, the glacier begins to slide more easily over the bedrock. Meltwater channels open and close, forming networks that evolve slowly over centuries. These processes determine how fast a glacier advances, how deeply it carves into the land, and how it ultimately shapes the coastline. Even though these transformations occur at a pace far beyond human perception, they remind us that the polar world is not static. It is a living system, balanced between internal heat and external cold, between motion and stillness, between the ancient and the evolving. As you imagine this gentle, unseen warmth rising through the layers of ice, the mind begins to shift into a similar state of subtle balance. Thoughts no longer follow rigid pathways. Instead, they flow softly upward, like geothermal heat rising through deep earth. Beneath conscious awareness, deeper emotional and sensory processes begin to stir quietly, steadily, without urgency. This is the stage of relaxation, when the subconscious mind becomes more accessible, when sensations become softer, warmer, more diffused. Neural activity shifts from organized wakefulness to loose, free-flowing patterns associated with early dream formation. Just as warmth transforms ice from within, Relaxation transforms consciousness from the inside out. Breathing becomes the anchor for this transition. Inhales rise like gentle currents of heat. Exhales sink like cooling layers of ice returning to stillness. The rhythm is slow, deep, and restorative. Shoulders drop, the jaw releases, the muscles around the eyes soften. The nervous system responds to this rhythm with increasing calm, reducing heart rate and allowing tension within the body to dissolve layer by layer. These physiological changes resemble the delicate balance found beneath the polar surface, temperature gradients shifting lovingly, creating spaces for transformation and rest. And as this inner warmth continues to rise, merging with the quiet cold of your surroundings, you may feel a profound sense of harmony taking shape. Just as the earth breathes heat into the frozen depths, your mind breathes calm into your deeper awareness. The contrast between warmth and cold becomes soothing, not sharp an internal equilibrium that prepares you for the deeper stages of sleep. In this space, you drift effortlessly, held by both warmth and stillness, as your mind continues its gentle descent into restorative rest. Far above the frozen earth, the moon exerts a gentle pull on the polar oceans, an ancient gravitational rhythm that shapes tides even beneath the thick sheets of ice. Though the polar seas appear still at the surface, a slow, deliberate rise and fall unfolds beneath them, reflecting the lunar cycle with silent precision. These tides, though muted by cold and ice, move water across vast distances, bringing nutrients into hidden ecosystems and guiding the migration patterns of marine life. Scientists describe them as internal tides, deep currents shaped not by winds or storms, but by the gravitational whispers of the moon, a force so subtle and constant that it has shaped Earth's oceans for billions of years. In the polar regions, where the ice acts as a natural barrier, these tides create faint flexing motions, gentle expansions and contractions that travel through the ice like slow-moving waves. Each cycle is measured not in seconds, but in hours, unfolding with the unhurried tempo of celestial mechanics. This rhythmic pressure can cause the ice to crack softly, creating long, echoing tones known as cryoseisms or ice quakes. Though dramatic in name, these events are often delicate, barely perceptible vibrations that resonate through the frozen landscape. They serve as reminders that even the quietest environments are shaped by forces far beyond human control. Deep beneath the ice shelves, the tidal motion becomes a guiding rhythm for life. Certain species of fish and zooplankton synchronize their movements with these gravitational cycles, rising and falling through the water column as the tides shift. Biologists studying these patterns observe that even in near total darkness, where sunlight cannot reach and seasons blur into indistinguishable stretches of cold, life continues to follow the moon's invisible instructions. This connection between celestial mechanics and biological rhythm underscores the profound unity of natural systems, how distant bodies in space whisper instructions that guide the behavior of organisms in the deep. As you imagine these slow, steady tidal movements, your own awareness begins to adopt their rhythm. Thoughts rise and fall gently, expanding with each inhale and settling with each exhale. The gravitational pull of the moon becomes a metaphor for the pull of sleep, soft, constant, inevitable. Neural activity shifts towards synchronized patterns, resembling the slow oscillations associated with deep relaxation. The mind becomes a quiet ocean, shaped by forces beneath conscious awareness. Each breath becomes a tide, moving through the body with a calming, predictable flow. Breathing grows deeper, smoother, and more uniform. Inhales stretch softly upward, like water guided by the moon's pull. Exhales fall into stillness, like tides returning to rest beneath the ice. Muscles release their last traces of tension. The spine lengthens subtly. The heart rate steadies, aligning with the slow, gentle rhythm of the imagined tides. In this state, the mind becomes more susceptible to drifting, more willing to let go of wakefulness. The outer world fades, replaced by a quiet internal landscape guided by soft gravitational rhythms. And as this inner tide carries you forward, you may feel a profound sense of surrender, a readiness to drift without resistance, to be carried by something larger and quieter than yourself. Just as the polar oceans respond to the moon with unwavering calm, your mind begins to respond to the call of sleep with deepening stillness. Thoughts dissolve into gentle motion, sensations blur into softness, and awareness hovers at the threshold of dreams. In this peaceful state, you drift like a quiet tide beneath ancient ice, carried toward the tranquil depths of rest. In the frozen polar dawn, when temperatures plunge far below anything most climates ever experience, frost forms patterns of astonishing beauty across every surface it touches. These delicate crystalline structures, feathered ferns, radiating stars, branching fractals emerge from the air itself as water vapor transitions directly into ice. This process, known as deposition, relies on subtle variations in temperature, humidity, and surface texture. Under the right conditions, frost becomes a natural form of art, shaping intricate landscapes on stones, windows, and even the surfaces of snowflakes already resting on the ground. Scientists studying these patterns call them crystal memories, because each formation preserves the exact environmental conditions that gave rise to it. Frost crystals grow outward in branching fractals, guided by microscopic forces. A slight temperature gradient, even just 1 degree, can alter the direction of growth. Minute impurities in the air shift the branching pattern. Tiny vibrations from wind or nearby movement change the crystal's symmetry. As the structure expands, it forms patterns that resemble veins, feathers, or delicate tree limbs, each one unique, each one a frozen snapshot of a single moment in time. These formations are fleeting. The slightest rise in temperature can erase them instantly, returning their complexity to vapor. Yet for the brief time they exist, they reveal how sensitive the frozen world is to every subtle influence. On larger scales, similar processes occur within the polar atmosphere. Ice crystals suspended in cold air form halos, arcs, and shimmering pillars of light around the sun and moon, optical phenomena that depend on the alignment of millions of tiny crystals. These displays create luminous geometric shapes in the sky, appearing like rings or vertical beams of pale light. The Arctic and Antarctic host some of the most dramatic examples of these phenomena, their cold, dry air providing the perfect environment for crystals to remain suspended long enough to shape the light passing through them. These atmospheric displays are not merely beautiful, they offer insight into the structure of the atmosphere, revealing temperature gradients, humidity layers, and ongoing climate changes. As you imagine these delicate frost formations, crystals branching in silence, ice halos radiating gently across the sky, the mind begins to adopt their clarity and stillness. Thoughts become structured yet soft, forming intricate patterns that drift through awareness before dissolving into calm. Memory itself begins to reorganize in gentle ways, sorting impressions from the day into clearer shapes. This mirrors a biological process. During early stages of sleep, neural circuits begin consolidating memories, strengthening some pathways while fading others. The mind, like frost, forms delicate structures from the patterns of experience, shaping them silently in the dark. Breathing deepens, matching the quiet expansion of frost crystals branching across a window. Inhale softly, as though gathering the cool air that generates new formations. Exhale slowly, releasing warmth that melts away residual tension. Muscles loosen further, eyelids grow heavier. The mind drifts into a state that is neither fully conscious nor fully asleep, a state where images form and dissolve effortlessly, like crystals growing and melting across the surface of glass. This gentle fluidity marks the threshold of dreams, where imagination begins to take the lead. And as you settle deeper into this crystalline stillness, you may feel a sense of profound ease, a feeling that the world has grown quiet enough for you to rest without interruption. The patterns of frost become metaphors for the patterns forming in your own mind, calm, intricate, ephemeral, and deeply soothing. Awareness softens, thoughts disperse like melting crystals, and you drift gently toward deeper sleep. In this moment, the frozen world merges with your inner world, both evolving in quiet harmony as you continue your descent into restorative rest. In the polar regions, sunlight behaves in ways unfamiliar to the rest of the world. For much of the year, the sun hovers low along the horizon, tracing slow arcs across the sky without ever rising to full height. This low-angle light casts extraordinarily long shadows, shadows that stretch for tens of meters, moving gradually as the hours pass. The landscape becomes a theater of elongated forms where ice ridges, snowdrifts, and distant mountains seem to grow taller and more mysterious under the golden glow. Scientists call this phenomenon oblique illumination, a type of light that reveals surface textures with exquisite clarity. In such illumination, even the smallest ripple of snow becomes a visible pattern, each contour highlighted by the low sun's grazing touch. This gentle light interacts with ice in remarkable ways. Snow crystals scatter the sunlight, creating halos of luminous white. Blue ice reflects the deeper wavelengths, producing shimmering gradients that shift between sapphire and silver. On calm days, the horizon seems to glow softly, as though the atmosphere itself were illuminated from within. This effect is amplified during the polar twilight, the period when the sun dips just below the horizon but continues to cast indirect light across the sky. Twilight can last for hours in the Arctic and weeks in Antarctica, bathing the landscape in hues of lavender, gold, and pale rose. This slow transition between light and dark is one of the most calming natural phenomena on Earth. Animals of the polar regions have adapted to this unusual luminance. Caribou use the low sun to navigate, their eyes specialized to detect ultraviolet reflections on snow. Polar bears rely on the long shadows to spot seals resting near breathing holes. Birds adjust their circadian rhythms to the subtle brightness variations across days that blend into one another. Even microorganisms in the snow respond to these faint cues, adjusting metabolic activity to changes in light intensity measured not in seconds, but in weeks. The entire ecosystem moves to a rhythm dictated by the slow rotation of the sun around the horizon, a rhythm that feels more like breathing than a cycle of day and night. As you imagine this long golden twilight, the mind begins to move at the same measured pace. Thoughts stretch gently like the shadows on the snow, elongating into soft, unhurried forms. Awareness becomes more spacious, illuminated not by bright attention but by a calm, diffused glow. This mental illumination reflects a transition toward deeper relaxation, where the brain shifts from the active processing of wakefulness into the flowing, expansive state that precedes sleep. Neural networks become less rigid, allowing impressions to drift and blend like colors along the twilight horizon. Breathing follows this shift naturally. Each inhale feels like a slow rising of light, spreading quietly through the body. Each exhale feels like a gradual settling of shadow, lengthening and softening as the body releases tension. This rhythmic alternation mirrors the gradual movement of the polar sun, neither abrupt nor forceful, but steady, gentle, inevitable. Muscles loosen, shoulders drop, and the chest expands with ease. The physiological quiet that accompanies this rhythm deepens your connection to the calm, elongated light of the imagined landscape. And as this inner twilight settles within you, a profound sense of peace emerges. The world feels quieter, smoother, less defined. Boundaries soften, time stretches. You drift as though moving through a long, calm sunset that never fully ends, only deepens into softer shades. In this tranquil state, awareness hovers delicately between waking and sleep, ready to dissolve into dreams as naturally as the sun slips beneath the horizon. The long shadows of the polar world become the long shadows of your own thoughts, stretching, fading, merging into the restful darkness that awaits. As we reach the end of our journey through the frozen world, the vastness of the polar regions begins to fade into a softer, deeper silence, one that mirrors the quiet unfolding within your own mind. The landscapes of ice and shadow, of drifting snow and glowing twilight, dissolve into a gentle blur, as though the entire world is being wrapped in a blanket of calm. Every image we have explored, the slow tides beneath the ice, the shimmering auroras, the silent breath of geothermal warmth, settles into stillness. And within that stillness, the boundaries of thought begin to melt, leaving only a soothing, expansive quiet. The polar world, with all its frozen rhythms and subtle movements, reflects the cycles of the mind. Just as glaciers flow with patient grace, your thoughts flow more slowly now. Just as the long twilight softens the distinction between night and day, your awareness softens the distinction between waking and dreaming. The mind, once alert and curious, now drifts with the ease of snowflakes falling through a calm winter night. The scientific processes we followed, the formation of frost, the motion of tides, the shifting of light, have become metaphors for the inner transformation now taking place. Everything narrows into simplicity: breath, warmth, stillness. As your breathing deepens, you enter a space where even time feels different. Moments stretch into one another, slowly, seamlessly, like layers of ancient ice merging under pressure. Each inhale invites a little more quiet into the body. Each exhale releases the last remnants of tension. Your muscles soften, Your heartbeat slows, and your awareness sinks gently through layers of comfort, descending the way light descends through the blue walls of an ice cave. This descent is effortless, natural, and deeply safe, guided by the rhythms of your own physiology, just as the polar world is guided by the rhythms of earth and sky. Soon, thoughts stop forming into sentences. They become impressions, soft lights, drifting shapes, subtle feelings that float at the edge of consciousness. This is the hypnagogic doorway, where the waking mind gently withdraws and the dreaming mind steps forward. You move through this threshold as quietly as a tide moving beneath frozen seas. There is no resistance here, no need to hold on to anything. The mind simply surrenders to its own quiet intelligence, trusting the body's need for rest. In this moment, you are held by an inner stillness as deep as the ancient ice layers that have remained unchanged for thousands of years. And now, as you drift fully into this quiet heart of sleep, you become part of the very calm we have been exploring. The silence of the poles becomes your silence. The slow breath of glaciers becomes your breath. The soft glow of twilight becomes the glow of early dreams forming behind your closed eyes. You are wrapped in a world without urgency, without movement, without sound, a world shaped only by comfort, warmth, and rest. Let yourself sink completely now, deeper and deeper, until the waking world disappears entirely. There is nowhere else to be, nothing else to do. Just this moment, just this breath, just this gentle descent into sleep. And as you drift into dreams quiet, weightless, serene, the frozen world fades behind you, leaving only peace.